getting not just the scouting staff onboarded, but the coaches then onboarded to new procedures and modes of operation. So I think just some of the familiarities really helped just the flow and the way that we operate on a day-to-day basis, the schedule, the routine, what the coaches expect. That's been very clear and concise throughout the process, and I think it's just allowed us to maybe get to different or deeper dialogue maybe a little bit quicker on some of the guys that we're really honing in on.
And for both of you, how different is it in actually knowing your roster now? You've spent time with these guys, you kind of know what's in house compared to last year where it was kind of getting to know it.
That's the most helpful piece. I think being able to accelerate a lot of the conversations where at this point in time last year we were in true discovery mode, right? We were learning on the fly, and now we get to leverage all the information and experiences that we've had with everybody on our football team up to this point as a part of our decision making. And it just it allows those conversations, like Liam said, to be a bit deeper and get a little bit further into it at a more efficient manner.
Hey James, Trayvon got him stock up last week. How important was that to get buttoned up right now?
I think it was a pretty important piece. You know, he's somebody that I think by season's end, and I shared with the majority of you in the room, that he was somebody we wanted to align ourselves with beyond just the contract that we had at the time. And you know, his commitment to our football team, his commitment to his teammates, it seeps out of his soul, and it was very easy to see what his piece to our puzzle meant, and the scheme fit, the priorities that we have on our defense. You know, it just all really matches up in a real way, and glad that he was able to earn himself that opportunity and know that he's going to take advantage of it. He doesn't take it for granted, and he's the type of human being that you feel comfortable making a decision like that about. And really excited for really the evolution that we'll see moving forward with not only his usage, but that entire defensive front and those guys behind him as we get into year 2 of the system.
Hey Liam, at tight end you have Brenton obviously established, but as you look at the draft, how much do you have to project whether a guy knows how to block?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's like what you're projecting with both Y and F. It's like, okay, what Y has enough athletic, movements and athleticism and hands and ball skills and feel to be able to run the route tree, and then what F, essentially with so much of the spread offense and some of those guys not being in a lot of those situations that you're projecting a little bit. Can they do it? Can they block maybe at the second level and linebackers, safeties? What do those matchups look like for the player that we're talking about? And so yeah, there's a little bit of a projection, especially at that position, because you're seeing so many different ways they're being used, and then you look at how much the tight ends were used or the extra O-linemen were used in the NFL this year at the Y position, but also what the F and or the U could be in some of those multiple tight end personnel groupings.
James, do you have a good idea in terms of, it seems like you guys are operating from a position of strength in terms of the health of the roster, but you still have 11 picks. Are you happy with the positioning that you guys have put yourselves in going into year 2?
Yeah, really excited about it because those slots that you're thinking about are more contributing slots, and when you're talking about first-year players, typically that's the expectation, is finding a way to contribute and offer a positive impact. And it can be a little bit more challenging on the early end of a season as a rookie or even towards mid-season to really feel that come to life. And in the instances that it does, that's great, but usually that's above the expectation, especially when you're talking about pick 50 and beyond, right, which is where we find ourselves at this point. Excited about building off of last year's crop, knowing that it was just south of 11 picks, a couple in undrafted college free agency that were able to find their place, but look forward to sort of being in familiar territory this go around and being able to leverage prior experience with navigating the waters here in about a 2 weeks time and have some fun with it.
Yeah, when you do the best available player approach, do you limit that? Is it best available player, but if this happened or this guy is around?
Yeah, I think you'd like to say it's going to be best player available, and it's always going to come with a little nuance. You're going to compare across positions and where there's a clear visual for contributions and a vision from our coaching staff to seeing that player's skill set come to life, and you would typically appreciate the fact that could come to life sooner than later, and all that stuff has to be weighted against each other. So when you got two like players and one position allows maybe an earlier runway, you lean towards that direction, but it's not so black and white all the time. I think that's the type of dynamic you would want to be able to walk in at each pick point with the idea that, hey, we're not pigeonholed to one or two positions, but we have all of them where we feel comfortable taking a shot if the right player, the best player presents themselves.
Let's go back here.
Yeah. James, how hard is it to balance that, to piggyback off that a little bit, to balance that, getting a guy for immediate impact that doesn't have as much upside with looking at another position where there's positional value, where your roster's pretty set, but you gotta kind of look down the road a little bit, and he has more blue sky as a player.
Right, it's hard to say it's some black and white answer. It's typically gonna come with a lot of layers to it, and ultimately you gotta make what you feel like is in the best interest of our team in the now and the team for the future. But we're ready to go win some football games, and whoever can help us do that, we're gonna try and go ahead and add to the fold.
A quick follow-up as far as Travis Hunter, without getting too far into it, is he tracking to be ready to go for whatever timeline you guys have established for him to be a full go?
Yeah, he'll be, for all intents and purposes, a limited participant throughout the off-season program with the eyes on return to play at full tick and training camp.
Thank you.
Hey, Liam, how much do you enjoy evaluating defensive players?
Good question. Almost as good as your tight end question.
Yeah, yeah, it's I've always enjoyed watching tape. You know, I've watched a lot of evaluations of when my dad was recruiting D3 players in New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, watching all positions, and you gain an appreciation for the game as much as anything, and so you gain an appreciation for all that comes with it. Now, is it easier or more fun to watch some other positions at times that have a ball? You know, usually I tend to lean that way, but no, I think it's cool to see the impact and effect that the other side of the ball has, what that player can maybe do to help truly our team, not just in defense, but also on teams and special teams and what that looks like, and trying to have an open mind to some of those nuances that a defensive player could possess a little bit more or different value than a tight end, right? Or a different position that we're talking about on offense. So I've actually come to enjoy it. I found that there's a lot of ways, obviously, that you can impact the game without touching the football and having an impact on every single play.
James, most fun about
As boring
watching,
as it is. No.
the most fun about watching film with Liam, right? So when I'm just doing it by myself, I'm focused in on typically a single player going from one play to the next, in large part just evaluating what that guy's doing. When you start bringing a coach's lens into the conversation, they start diagnosing scheme across all 11 on offense, how's that matching up against what we're getting in the look from the defense, and then 3 minutes later we're moving on to the next one. It's a classic, but you get a PhD every offseason of trends schematically when you start diving in with our coaching staff on a lot of the draft work and free agent work. So that's always a level up for our scouting staff, analytics staff that are in on those conversations and get an idea of some of those layers that you may not otherwise keep top of mind unless you're focused on the schematic.
Does that make your job harder though, when he's sitting in there?
Of course it does.
Absolutely not. I get to process it a slower tick. I don't have to be so rapid fire. No, it's good. I get to take a pause a little bit and think about it differently. It opens my mind.
It just gets a little drawn out. No.
James, how important is the discourse and connection with the coaching staff beyond, Liam and Camp and Grant, with the assistant coaches, guys who are really going to be day to day with these guys?
That's a critical piece. It's as I think back to our opening dialogue as taking a position, me sitting at the podium with Tony and Liam, Shad, Mark, and TK. Pure collaboration was what came to mind in our decision making. Without it, it becomes very challenging to showcase a clear visual for how a player is going to fit our environment, how a player is going to fit into our team or a position group. And so I think in order to come to that conclusion, we got to have a lot of back and forth. We got to have a lot of insights being brought to the table and see where it is that we have alignment and where we don't. And in the instances that we don't, we keep watching more. And if we're unable to find a common space, which we are in some instances, you got to move on to the ones that you can and be okay with whether or not the players that you're not go find success elsewhere, knowing that, hey, it just wasn't going to be a match for us, or it wasn't going to come with clarity. And when it isn't, it's hard to try to say, like, let's force this. You feel me on that?
What are the challenges of having to wait till 56? I mean, never say never moving up, but are there challenges that come with that? And will it be an excruciating first round to sit through knowing that you don't have that option?
You know, Liam's
Waited a
been
lot
through it with me
longer.
before.
Waited a lot longer before.
There is no doubt
Yeah.
about it. We
Waited a
waited
lot.
longer.
What was
Yeah. It's
But-
fun. We were having a blast.
104 was our first pick.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
at least get to cut that in half a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what do we got? 2 weeks, 1 day for now? So that's,
2 weeks from today.
Yeah.
well, until our pick.
Oh, yeah.
For now,
Yeah.
right? So that kind of thing. You're always gonna stay agile.
Right.
And so you're never bored. You're always thinking through what might we be able to do. And I think that mental gymnastics certainly is an engaging element, regardless of where your first pick point is.
Do you not do mocks when you're that late?
No, we do scenarios.
You'll still, okay.
Yeah, we walk through, hey, if this pot of players is there, which one do we feel most comfortable targeting, knowing that at our next pick point or our next few pick points, these are the players that we feel like may be in scope? How do we feel about the combination of these different players together? So on and so forth. So yeah, we're working through that a little bit. Obviously, that stuff on draft night, there's no telling. All it takes is one team to take a player that you want, and you're moving on to the next that you were eyeing up. And that may, in fact, alter what you do at the pick point behind it, the pick point behind that. So we're trying to chop through that a little bit as best we can.
James, how much do you track tendencies of other teams and like the perceived needs maybe of those teams that are ahead of you in the draft? Do you do more of that when you have a pick this late?
Yeah.
Than like obviously last year?
Yeah, all teams, just like offenses and defense throughout the years, have typical tendencies that they lean into, and they break those tendencies, which is always fun. And we try to do the same and be aware of our own, so that they can't totally be leveraged against us. So I think that is a very important piece to our mapping of where we might need to get ahead of somebody or be able to jump in the draft or feel comfortable if we were able to move back a certain amount, that we're not at risk for losing out on a couple players that we want to target. So that's an important piece to that strategy, is being in tune with a lot of those elements from each club or even trees of decision makers.
You mentioned running scenarios. By the time the draft gets here, how many different scenarios do you think you'll have run through? Do you have to run more because you're in the second round at 56?
I don't know that it's any more as much as it is, you probably hone in on your hot list, and then you're pretty refined at that point. We got a really intimate and detailed understanding of who and what we want, those types of elements, so it trims the list a good bit. While there's 250 plus picks, it's nowhere close to us saying these are our priorities, 250 plus. It's a lot fewer and farther in between, so it allows us to, even if we were picking earlier, kind of focus that conversation a little bit.
But you can
Yeah,
find
still-
out how you like people
Yeah.
by going through those scenarios.
Yeah.
Okay, he's gone. Who do you take? Going through that process, find out who people like.
Okay.
Alright, you just took this guy,
Right.
now you're probably not taking this guy
Right.
at this slot.
Go through a
Are
million.
you cool with that?
No.
Liam, does it help that you're evaluating guys that were coming out of high school when you were coaching college? Cause I assume you don't get
Yeah.
to look at as much college football right now.
Yeah.
And then following it up, are you gotta convince Baselli to not take 11 offensive linemen?
Trust me, yes. That answer, if they don't play hard, it's hard for Tony to get around that.
Regardless of position.
Regardless of position, which I really
They
appreciate.
don't block or tackle.
Yeah, at a high clip. No, we're working on him. No, he's doing, I appreciate that about Tony, you know, and because it's our culture, it's, you know, it's what we wanna be, is physical and tough, and that can't be something that we sacrifice. And then to say, yeah, there's a lot of players that are coming out that I've recruited, you know, intimately, in terms of being in their houses, and so coach them in college, a number of guys that we've evaluated, and then also been in some of their homes or at camps and seen those guys. And so yeah, that's a cool part, is to see the evolution of those guys and to know maybe a little bit more of the background on some of those players that I was fortunate enough to be around in the SEC, and a lot of guys that went other places that we had on visits, right, or that I went and saw off campus. So I really appreciate that part. I mean, that was the best part I thought about recruiting in college, was like going into high schools and seeing the players and seeing them in their environment and meeting the coaches and their teachers. So it brings back some memories, yeah, for sure.
Liam, you and your staff are obviously very connected to the process, but what's it like for you just kind of seeing James and the scouting department in the element this time of the year?
Yeah, it's really cool. You're in the lab so much in football during the season, right, with your coaches, and whether that's schematically, personnel, fundamentally, technique, but also philosophically. So I get a new perspective, or not a new perspective, but just a different lens of culture, of belief, of exactly what we're hunting up, and that alignment showing up of core beliefs in what you believe in as an evaluator and as a coach and as personnel. So it's really cool to hear different perspectives from some of the guys in the room that we're sitting there watching tape with, and seeing that. But a lot of the times it's very much in alignment, which is fun.
James, what's the strongest position group in this world?
It's probably hard to say. I think the good part is, based off of where we're mapping things out, there's a lot of depth of positions that we feel like we're gonna address. Beyond that, as it always seems to be the case, is when it comes to the rush, there's a good chunk of defensive ends in this crop in comparison to maybe some of the others, which I think will make for an exciting first round, because typically when you can rush the passer, there's gonna be a priority, a premium gets placed on that.
James, many believe that defensive tackle is the weakest position group, maybe with quarterback in this year's draft, and they say that they're very good against the run, but they don't create any pressure inside. Is that agreeable? Are there complete defensive tackles in this draft?
I think there's no reason to think that guys that we might label as incomplete become complete by the time their NFL career is over. There's development that occurs and surprises people. It's why day 3 and undrafted college free agents become Pro Bowlers and All Pros. So to cap that as a concrete sort of outlook is hard to do. I think there will be plenty of people that 4 or 5 years from now surprise a lot of the remarks, or counter a lot of the remarks that can be said. But to that end, it's typically the case that the guys on the inside, they tend to do a pretty good job at holding up against the run more than they would rush the passer. That's typically the case. So it's actually more abnormal to be somebody that's sacking the QB at a regular tick on the interior. So by default, it's typically going to be the way you describe the inside of the defensive line. So I think there's plenty of reason to think that over the course of the next 4 years, some of these guys are going to surprise the narrative.
Speaking of defensive tackles, Dexter Lawrence is a guy that requested a trade. Is that somebody who you guys might pick up the phone on, see what the asking price is, or what is that process like?
That's not something we've gone into, and obviously he's under contract with them, so not at liberty necessarily to even talk about it.
Hey, Liam, when you get the players back here in a week and a half, what do you want your initial message to be?
You're chomping at the bit, especially after going to the owners' meetings and talking some smack and having some fun, but also it just feels a little bit closer, right, as getting the guys back in the building. And the entire message is we're attacking this offseason, and we're attacking the details, we're attacking our relationships, we're attacking our communication, because there's change, there's different communications and relationships that need to be blended and matched, and pouring into each other from a detail standpoint. I think that's going to be key and critical, and getting better with less time. I think I mentioned that last week, is we're fortunate last year as a first year staff to have an extra week, right? And we maximized the entire off season with less time as a coaching staff and with the players being extremely dialed into everything that we're trying to improve on. Those areas I talked about of stink, that we need to work on, and then continuing to focus on the fundamentals and techniques in which we always want to coach, but we're attacking everything that we're doing this offseason.
Liam, Bashal and LeQuint did some really good things as rookies. What are some elements of their game that you're excited to see improve in year 2?
Yeah, I think you look at what two showed in terms of getting downhill on it, inside the tackles, that really wasn't as much on his tape in college. I think we can do a better job of giving him some opportunities, a little bit more that fit his skill set as well in college, and get him going in some of those instances as well in the pass game, in the screen game. And I thought he did a great job. I know he had the one fumble against the Colts, but ball security was something that we honed on a lot and we really tried to work on. And that wasn't just with him, that was with the whole group. But okay, now it's like year 2, let's go be more creative, like, hey, now you learn ball security at a premium, what we're looking for, the standard. Now let's go take it to the next level. And then LeQuint, I think, showed so much in terms of the toughness, physicality, the care factor, third down runs that he was really good at for us. I know he had 60 catches or so in college, and so that's an area I think we can continue to lean into him as well.
Hey James, what scout on your staff has no filter this time of year?
I'd like to think that we're in a spot where everybody's in that bucket. We try to cultivate
We
that.
got somebody in mind too.
Spill it.
We cultivate the water cooler conversations, right? To make it less of boardroom style, more of, hey, if you were just catching me at the water cooler, what would you bring to the surface, right? What would you talk about, and make it sound like that, not a buttoned up report reading, right? Because I do think it's very important to get to the actual sentiment and the root of how you're feeling about a player, a dynamic, position conversation, all those types of things, without trying to work around your real feeling on it. And sometimes the idea that, hey, I gotta be buttoned up or filtered can get in the way of the root coming to the top of the conversation, or the unfiltered sentiment coming to the top. So we've tried to get to a place where everybody fits that mold, and I think it's starting to show itself less where it's any one individual, and it's actually in a very positive way, unfiltered.
James, are you able to,
We have time for 3 more, okay?
be able to gauge if you're a lot higher on a prospect than you think around the league maybe is, and if so, how do you kind of gauge when to select that player?
That's an awesome question. I think it does become apparent in the instances where, let's just say the world is saying a player is going early, but you don't see the vision for how they would fit here as being, we just don't like them as much as maybe what you would label mock draft world is saying. And the flip side of that, don't see this guy anywhere, yet there's a lot of appreciation in some instances. What we'll really focus on is taking players that we feel have a very clear fit within the way we operate, regardless of what that might mean in terms of the outward perspective, right? It's what fits us and what makes sense to us. At the end of the day, if they help us win football games, that's a win for the Jaguars.
I mean, you don't care about the draft, right?
Typically it's not the spot we put the energy in, right? Just curious. I wasn't good with grades even back in elementary school, so why be good at them now? It's wins and losses.
Hey Liam, Carson Beck is a local quarterback here. How much do you think his experience in different schemes, big games, will help him find a home?
Yeah, I think you look at his, production and different things that he was asked to do at Georgia, both underneath the center and the shotgun, turning his back to the defense. making, I guess you call it, NFL throws, like from a route tree standpoint and from a timing and rhythm standpoint. I think he's been really well coached. And then you go to Miami and you're operating a little bit more shotgun, spread, so now you're seeing a little bit more of the baseball shortstop. I don't know if he played baseball, but like spit. Whereas Georgia more play action, under center, let the ball get down the field a little bit. Now you're able to maybe see some of the shorter intermediate, different window throws that he was able to make this year. And so I remember watching him in pregame in 23 when we were at Georgia. And I was watching him throw the pregame. I was like, dang, dude, that thing's coming off his hand pretty good. So haven't been able to meet him or anything like that, but I think he's got a shot.
Knowing former coaches,
Wrap it
the way
up here.
you know Coach Sumrall, and I didn't really make the connection to Caleb last year.
Yeah.
Lane, but does knowing, not necessarily because the coach is your friend, but
Yeah.
the expectations and the workload that's
That's right.
put on them and how the player responds to it, does that track, or does that really help you make decisions on how guys are gonna respond once you get them into your program?
Absolutely. Like I think our scouting staff, and they gather so much information from the university, right, the school, the director of ops, the athletic trainers, the strength and conditioning, the coaching staff, right? You have so many different resources. And so to be able to call the head football coach that, not just because he's a head football coach, but because we have a shared interest and value of standards and of how to coach and how to go about things and what a player can and cannot take in terms of coaching and how they handle coaching, right? And how they receive information, how they best learn. I mean, those are really important conversations when it comes to some of the information that we're gathering. And look, you try to gain as much, but also not try to make too many phone calls that you're maybe muddying the waters.
Yeah.
But I think some of those guys that you're really close with, like John and Brad White, for instance, at Florida last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. Yeah, you're able to have some real conversations and get real intel that way.
Gentlemen,